My name is Chip Blake. I am I'm the editor-in-chief of Orion. Orion is delighted to be here, and we're grateful to Brent for inviting us to act as a co-sponsor of the event. Are people in from the hallway? Can anybody communicate that to me, since we're on communication? From up here, it sounds like there are a lot of people out there. Yeah. Okay. The name of this panel is a Communicator's Call to Action. And the purpose of this is to help us to think about what it means to communicate about the environment. When I think about environmental communication, and I guess I'm a professional environmental communicator, could we ask, there's so much ambient noise up here from the hallway, could we ask people to either come in or to keep it down a little bit? Could somebody issue that, please? Thanks. When I think about environmental communication, there are two things that come to mind for me right away. The first is Rachel Carson. This is the second time today that Rachel Carson has been mentioned. So I will just say that the more I learn about Rachel Carson, the more remarkable she seems as a person. And specifically what I think of is Silent Spring. Silent Spring was published in September 1962. It was serialized in the New Yorker that summer. It was chosen as the Book of the Month Club in fall 1962. And this book changed the way Americans perceived the environment and perceived their relationship with the environment. Silent Spring was mainly about synthetic pesticides, but Rachel Carson was not the first person to write about synthetic pesticides. Lots of people had written about synthetic pesticides and their concerns about synthetic pesticides beginning right after World War II. And they wrote about it with no change in government policy, no change in citizen policy. Does this sound familiar to you, climate activists out there? And Rachel Carson changed all that with Silent Spring because she approached her book not as a scientist, even though she was a very good scientist. She approached this as a communicator. She was out to communicate with people about synthetic pesticides. She was out to connect with people's heads and hearts. 5 years after Silent Spring was published, the Environmental Defense Fund was founded by people who really their thinking was shaped by Silent Spring. 10 years after Silent Spring was published, the Environmental Protection Agency, which was described by a New York Times reporter as the shadow of Silent Spring, was formed in 1972. The second thing that comes to mind for me is Inconvenient Truth, which I think a lot of us recognize as an event that shifted the way we talk about and think about climate change. Al Gore was not the first person to talk about climate change. Obviously, lots of people had talked about climate change for a long time. But Al Gore and Davis Guggenheim and the people who made Inconvenient Truth, they were not out just to deliver data about climate change. They were out to communicate. They were out to change the entry point through which someone connected with the topic of climate change, and they did. So what's significant about these two stories to me is one, that these are two instances of dramatic shifts in public perception of environmental issues that came about not because of discoveries in science, but because of the way we communicated about changes in discoveries in science. And the second thing is that although I believe that knowledge is power, I think knowledge is only as good as our ability to communicate that knowledge. So we have two people here today to help us think about what it means to communicate about the environment. Andy Revkin has been on the staff of the New York Times since 1995. I'm sure a lot of you feel as challenged as I do in trying to keep up with all of the new information that's coming out about climate change and alternative technology. And Andy's blog with the New York Times.earth, for me, that's the simplest and most trustworthy way for me to do that. I'm sure a lot of you feel the same way. Janice Ray is the author of 3 nonfiction books. Her book, The Ecology of a Cracker Childhood, won the American Book Award, won the Phil Reed Award given by the Southern Environmental Law Center, and was chosen as the book that all Georgians should read. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Andy. Thank you. Oh, one final note is that we will have questions at the end of this, and we'll be sure to give some time for people to because we want to communicate with you too.